Hey there, nation, and welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and welcome to another episode of Commander Cheapskate Gamer Reviews, where we review various products related to the wargaming hobby. And on today's episode, we'll be reviewing the latest supplement to Games Workshop's Necromunda lineup, Necromunda Hive Secundus. We will discuss the box set's contents, its rules, and provide our overall opinion on this product. And because we will put a little bit more of a deeper dive on this one, I will put timestamps in the description box down below so that way you guys can click and navigate to the part of the video that interests you the most. So that being said, let's go and talk about should you buy Necromunda Hive Secundus. So before we start working on our review, full disclosure, I did not actually get this from Games Workshop. I actually bought this game for myself using my own money. I went to my local gaming store and I bought it with my own money, so that way I can give my 100% opinion on this product. That way I don't have to worry about any 0% any outside influence, going over my judgment on this one. That's one of the things I think is kind of interesting about some review products sometimes. Sometimes if you are provided the product from a company, your viewpoint on it might be a little bit biased because of that, but because I bought this with my own money and I got it for my own self, I'm going to be able to be completely honest about what I think of this box set. So that being said, let's talk about what's exactly inside the box set in terms of its contents. So here's a shot of my workstation. As you can see, I have a couple of sprues out for the miniatures. As you can see, you have 2 stacks of sprue sheets for the Malstrain Genestealers, as well as the Tyramites, as well as 2 sheets for the Brood Scum, as well as 2 sheets for the new Saar Tek Hunters, which are brand new specialists available in this gang. And on the right hand side, you have a single sheet of sprue for the Orrus Spyre Hunter that also carries the parts for the Carryoted miniature as well. So pretty standard layup. They kind of like their typical sprue layout. You just got to go through, clip them, and assemble your miniatures, of course, and pretty standard, all things considered. Also included in the box set are 2 sets of guides. The first one on the left hand side is the instruction manual to assemble your miniatures with all the various options you have for that come in the box set, so that is really nice. And on the right hand side, of course, you got 2 quick reference sheets as well. Pretty much shows you how the rules are supposed to work and give you a brief description about what they have, as well as a couple of weapon templates, weapon trait rules on there as well for you to use. Also included in the box set are 2 paper tiles, and I do mean paper tiles on this one. When they were saying paper tiles, I was actually hoping they were saying like cardboard, like they did in the original Necromunda box set when you bought it from the very first release back in 2017, where it was double-sided cardboard, but this is not the case. It's actually a double-printed poster, basically, that actually has 2 different sets of terrain styles that you can use for your map. So that's what they actually have there. I was kind of upset about this one. It's kind of sad. It's kind of like shrinkflation. It's rearing its ugly head on this one, so I was kind of sad about that. I'm not sure why Games Workshop just didn't give us the cardboard for it, because we are paying $170 for this box set, so having the hard cardboard would have been nice, but they decided to elect with this paper version instead. So I will warn you guys, because it is made out of paper, it's going to be a little bit more fragile, more apt to be destroyed or get damaged over time, so be extremely careful with your paper tiles on this. Also included in this box is a sprue for bulkheads, in case you don't have bulkheads miniatures for your terrain. You also have your typical templates on the right hand side with the flamer template, as well as the 5-inch as well as 3-inch blast templates, and of course you have another set of tokens as well as a bag of bases for your miniatures. Also included in the box set is a huge stack of cards. These cards consist of the different territories that you can get in this game, which is kind of nice. They also have some rules for those in the rulebook. Same thing with blank fighter cards you could use for your fighters, as well as for the miniatures that are also included in the box set as well. And they have a new game mechanic called Archeo-Loot, which are basically looting items that you're going to be going after by trading in data crystals in this campaign setting. I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the campaign rules. They have a bunch of cards for them, which is kind of nice, but unfortunately that also means that there's no rules for the Archeo-Loot cards in the actual rulebook itself, and that part is kind of sad, which means that you're really relying upon keeping those cards so that way you could use them, which means if you lose any, or if anything gets damaged or anything like that, or if you don't have access to them, at this point there's no other recourse for you to look up what those rules are at this point, so that part is kind of sad, so I'm not really happy about that. Also, you have dice, of course, black as well as teal dice, which look really cool, all things considered. And lastly, of course, you have the rulebook. The rulebook, of course, is paperback. It is not a hardback book, which I was kind of sad about. Once again, I feel that shrinkflation has reared its ugly head on this particular box set as well. So I was kind of sad to see that, because every single rulebook up to this point has pretty much been hardcover. So I'm not sure why they didn't put a hardback on it, but it's paperback. So if you're a stickler about that kind of thing, that kind of is kind of rough. And of course, they give you 1 single ruler, like they always do as well. And that pretty much makes it the box contents in this box set. So now that we're going to talk about the box sets, let's talk about the rules real quick. So in this book, they do give you rules for the Secundan Incursion gang, which basically have 1,250 credits in order to spend on your starting roster for your gang as well. Some rules to remember about the Secundan Incursion gangs is that you cannot make any alliances, hire any hired guns, or have any hanger-ons if you decide to go with this game mechanic, at least for now. The rules state that the hired guns and hanger-ons can't go to Hive Secundus unless, the rules say otherwise. So I'm imagining as time goes on and more supplements get released for Hive Secundus, we'll actually see those kind of hired guns and hanger-ons and brutes that will join with your gang. At the same time, the Orrus Spyre Hunter is also the leader of your gang as well, and that makes sense because this is like a self-contained campaign that comes with the box set. So let's talk about the Spyre real quick. So they gave some rules that are dealing with the Spyrers individually. Now I'm not sure if these are going to apply to all Spyrers in the future, but this is what we have so far. So first of all, we have reflex enhancers for these guys. Now if you guys remember from the Wargaming community webpage, it talked about how Spyrers can activate twice. And this is what they're talking about. What ends up happening is you give this fighter actually 2 ready markers. And the reason why is because they will actually use their first activation. You remove 1 ready marker and they do their normal actions as always. And then you can come back to them later on if you want to and do a second activation for them as well. So that's a really powerful ability for these guys, but given the fact that Spyre gangs are pretty small, or in this case you only get the 1 Spyre for your gang, that kind of makes sense as well. You also, it's called the Master of the Hunt special rule, which means if you get hit with a ranged weapon, normally speaking your fighter will get pinned. That's how the rules work. But for Spyres though, if they get hit, they do not get pinned. In fact, the only time they do get pinned is they actually take damage from the actual attack, meaning they suffer a flesh wound or a serious injury of some sort. So make these guys very, very deadly as well, so you don't have to worry about pinning mechanics for these guys as well. You also, what's called kill count special rule as well, which basically means that for every 4 fighters they put out of action, they pretty much get a boost to their abilities for the most part. Either one, they could actually perform a suit evolution post-action sequence where basically you roll on this table that kind of gives you enhancements for their hunting rigs, or you can remove any glitches that they might have accumulated as well. Now if you want to know what a glitch is, basically the glitch is basically like the lasting injuries for these guys. They have their own little table with some interesting game mechanics on that. I'm not going to go too much into detail about it just because I don't want to really violate copyright all that much, but just to give you the preface on that, that's pretty much what they have. So they have their own injuries, and you can remove those injuries off your hunting rig if you get those kill counts enough. Alright, so let's talk about the Orrus Spyre Hunter specifically. This fighter costs 350 credits, and this guy's got some pretty crazy statistics. He's got 5-inch movement, 3+ weapon skill and ballistic skill, 3 strength, 4 toughness, 3 wounds, 3 initiative, 2 attacks, 7 leadership, 5 cool, 6 willpower, as well as 6 intelligence as well. Now this guy, of course, does come with special rules. He does come with the special rules of reflex enhancers, Master of the Hunt, as well as kill count, as well as Spyre hunting rig glitches, so he does have that. He also has skill access with brawn, combat, as well as shooting being his primary, with agility as well as ferocity being his secondary as well. Now as for his weapon equipment, his equipment in Gore Gear is actually kind of limited because it deals basically with his hunting rigs. Basically you have a couple of weapon options you can go with this guy. You could trade out this guy's talons for what's known as Orrus Power Fists, which are higher strength attacks with that. They could also replace their bolt launchers from the back of their gauntlets with 2 other types of weapons called Volkite Dischargers or Disintegration Matrices, which is also kind of cool as well. They could also be equipped with bio boosters, a respirator, as well as a Caryatid Prime. But that's really about it. Their equipment is pretty much limited, and the reason why is because most of this stuff that they use is on their Spyre hunting rigs, so that's something you do have to keep into effect. After that, we have the Saar Tek Hunters, which are the brand new specialists associated with all Saar gangs, and these guys cost 75 credits apiece. And the thing that these guys have for special rules is that they are specialists, which means they can also choose their own stuff. But the thing to remember is in this book, they actually make a distinguish between specialists as well as Gang Fighter X special rules. For you guys who are aware, you must have this number of fighters with a Gang Fighter X rule as you do other fighters in a gang, otherwise it's an illegal build. And these Tech Hunters actually count as specialists, not as Gang Fighter X guys. So you do have to replace these guys with other gang fighters in order to kind of balance it out. So that's something you do have to worry about as well. Now, as for their characteristics are actually quite typical of, your typical Saar Tek for the most part. The only the difference is that they have 1 list of ballistic skills, so only ballistic skill 3, but they are movement 5, so they're a little bit faster as well. At the same time, you also have what's known as the expert in their field special rule, which basically means that you basically have 4 different types of guys to choose from. You have what's called an Augur Tech, for example, which can perform the Find Hidden Tech post-battle action, a Biotechnist, a Gun Tech, as well as Technomac. And the reason why these guys are important is because in the game campaign mechanics, you really can't visit the trading posts. So these specialists become very important for your game because what they do is they actually do things like For example, give you weapons, equipment, war gear that you might need for your gangs, and based on what they kind of role that you make with these guys, the post-battle sequence kind of determines what kind of stuff you can get, and that's the reason why these guys are actually quite interesting. They also have a really cool, interesting set of weapons they can choose from. Most of it's quite standard for most for most Malstrain gangs, but they do have some special things. For example, they have what's called a combo weapon, which basically is a thing called a flamer and a man catcher, which is basically like a close combat weapon mounted on a flamer, for example, and that's a unique weapon that they have. Or for example, another thing they have is called an auger specs, which allows you to do like special actions, communications, things. So they are kind of unique in the way that they're outfitted. So let's talk about the Malstrain fighters in this one. You have the Brood Scum. If you guys remember from the cost, Malstrain gangs actually don't get credit values attached to them. They get what's called Malstrain points. And the reason why is because every single time you draw a territory to fight over in this campaign, you get a number of Malstrain points that you, the player, can then spend on in order to put fighters on here. And one of these guys, of course, are Brood Scum. They cost 1 Malstrain point apiece. They come with 40 points worth of equipment. They have the exact same rules as normal Hive Scum that you usually get as well. Same thing with most of the weapons. They have also most of the weapons available to them as well. They can only take frag grenades for their war gear, so that part is kind of sad, but they can take mesh armor that'll make them a little bit more survivable, as well as photo goggles, so that part is quite cool about these guys. And of course, the most deadly of these guys are the Malstrain Genestealers. These guys cost 3 Malstrain points apiece. Their characteristics are 6-inch movement, 3+ weapon skills, 6+ ballistic skill, 4 strength and toughness, 3 wounds, 3 initiative, 3 attacks, 7 leadership, 4 cool, 6 willpower, as well as 10 intelligence as well. They're armed with razor sharp claws, as well as venomous bites. They also have what's equipped with basically the equivalent of mesh armor, as well as a bio booster. And they do have the skills dodge, evade, nerves of steel, as well as rain of blow skills as well. And that automatically comes with these guys, and of course they don't level up as time goes on because that's how the campaign mechanics works for these guys. And then last we got the Malstrain Tyramite, which costs 1 Malstrain point as well. They have 7-inch movement, 4 weapon skills, 6 ballistic skill, 3 strength and toughness, 1 wound, 2 initiative, 1 attack. They also have 8 leadership, 5 cool, 6 willpower, as well as 10 intelligence. These guys can also fly, so they can ignore terrain as well. They also have the dodge skill. And of course, they do have flak armor as well as a bio booster in order to keep them looking a little more survivable. And they have a unique weapon called a Stinger that they can also use as well. And that pretty much makes up the rules for the fighters in this campaign. So let's go and talk about the Underhells campaign mechanics for this part. So this is a self-contained game. It is very much a dungeon crawler style game where it's just a player versus a games master or an arbitrator. The arbitrator takes the role of the Malstrain Genestealers, while the Incursion gang is played by a single player. So there's not any game mechanics available for multiple players, it doesn't look like. So things that we keep in mind, there is no trading post on this one. That's why your tech hunters are so important in this campaign, because they would do a lot of the things that you would normally do at the trading post. I think it's supposed to represent the fact that you're isolating, you're in a place you're not supposed to be in the first place. At the same time, you do have data crystals being a currency type in this game. Think of them as like weird stone shards from Mordheim, if those of you guys ever played those games. Pretty much if you capture data crystals, you can trade them in for Archeo-Loot. I believe how it works is that if you could trade in one data crystal, you can randomly choose a random Archeo-Loot item from the deck of cards, and if you spend 3, you get to choose which one you want as well. And so I'll talk a little bit more about those Archeo-Loot and what they actually looks like here in a second. At the same time, they also bring you 7 brand new scenarios that's themed for the Hive Secundus box set as well as for the Underhells campaign. So there's a little bit of variety there for you to use for that. So in the Underhells campaign, territories are extremely important in this game. What ends up happening is every single time you go through a different phase of the game, you pick a randomly chosen territory from the deck of cards, and that is what you're fighting over in that particular level of the campaign, and they have different resources available to you. Now, there are rules for the territories in the rulebook, so if you don't have access to the cards or something happens to your cards, that's not such a big deal because they are available in the rulebook as well. At the same time, these territories also provide the fighting force composition for the Malstrain. They'll give them like a number of Malstrain points, like either like 4 points or 7 points or 20, no, not 20 points, or whatever number of points that you want. And then, of course, use the game master or the arbitrator can choose which fighters you want from your Malstrain guys to actually make up that group. So that part is kind of cool. So you do have Archeo-Loot, like we talked about, or also Archeo-Loot is known as from. You actually draw them from a deck of cards, but like I said before, there are no rules for these items in the rulebook, so if you lose your card or damage them some way, or you can't get access to them, it could kind of hinder your ability to play this game, so that's something I'm not really big on as well. Hopefully it will be released in later supplements later on, but we'll see. And like I said before, the idea behind this is that you trade in create crystals to either one, randomly draw a Archeo-Loot card, or you use 3 of these data crystals to choose your own. And there's a couple examples what they have here. They have what's called a disposable game mechanic on it, the trait for these, which means that you can only use it for the one battle you use it for. So for example, one was called Nanomeds. It does have the disposable rule attached to it. It says once per battle during their activation, a fighter equipped with this Archeo-Tech loot may perform the use Nanomeds free action. If this fighter is prone and seriously injured, they become prone and pinned and their activation ends. Otherwise, they may remove all flesh wounds that they have suffered. So that's an example of one Archeo-Loot item. Another one's called a Displacement Harness. As is during their activation, a fighter equipped with this Archeo-Loot may perform the Displace basic action. This fighter moves 2d6 inches in a direction chosen by their controller, ignoring impassable terrain. If this fighter ends this move on or within a piece of impassable terrain, move them to the shortest distance required to place them in open terrain. So that's another example of some Archeo-Loot that you can get access to. They have some really powerful abilities, and they actually can change up the game quite a bit. So my final thoughts on this product. It did cost me $188 in the United States if I wanted to buy this at my local game store, but that's after tax and everything. That's just pretty sad. I mean, it's pretty normal. I do find that it's sad, however, that shrinkflation has affected this war game specifically, and not necessarily in the items that you get, but in terms of things like, for example, the tiles are actually made out of paper. They're not actually made out of cardboard, which is kind of sad. The hardback, the rule book is not a hardback book, it's a softback book, for example. So I'm kind of sad about that. For $188, those things should be there as well. Now this game, it can be used as a dungeon crawler style standalone game, so that is something to keep that in mind. So if you are wanting to play Necromunda, but you don't want to really get too far into it too much, you're just looking for a really simple version of it, this would be a perfect game to do that. You can go into the Underhells and do missions and stuff like that, and have a lot of fun doing that. So if you're looking for something really simple that way, it could be really nice. Or if you're looking for a way to expand your repertoire of different campaigns available to you, it's another good thing about it. At the same time, I don't like the reliance on cards in this rulebook. I much prefer that those rules will actually be in the actual rulebook. So like, for example, while they did give us territory cards, which is nice, those territory rules are in the rulebook, so it's not a big deal if you should lose those cards or misplace them in some way. I don't like that the Archeo-Loot is in card form. I would really appreciate it more if it was actually in the books. That way, if you lose those cards or if you can't get those cards anymore, for example, it's not that big of a hindrance as well. Now, on the positive side, the miniatures are absolutely beautiful as well, and the Spyres especially look really cool, and I'm actually really looking forward to seeing exactly what they do with the Spyres in future releases, because it looks really promising. It kind of reminds me of the way that they used to do it back in the golden ages of Necromunda back in the 90s. So in the end, should you buy it? In my opinion, it kind of depends on your situation and your priorities. If you're just wanting to get the miniatures just by themselves, $180 is a little steep for that. So if you just want to get the miniatures by themselves, I would recommend that you'd wait until those miniatures become individually available on their own. You might have to wait some time, but you know, if money is an issue, then that's just what you got to do for that. Other things, like if you're just starting brand new into Necromunda and you want to get this as your very first starting box, that's perfectly fine. It has everything you need to actually start playing the game as well. If you don't like playing in the Ash Waste, for example, you don't like using vehicles or anything like that, you just want to stay in the Underhives, or in this case in Hive Secundus, this could be a good way for you to use that as well. Now, there are some flaws with this box set in terms of like the finishes on this, in terms of hardcover books and cardboard tiles, but even though they do have some flaws, overall I think it's actually pretty good. The miniatures they give you are quite good. At the same time, they also give you rules for those as well, which is kind of nice, and I'm actually quite satisfied with the purchase I made for this as well. And it also makes me extremely hopeful to see exactly what kind of new additions they're going to add to the Hive Secundus lineup. I would like to see like those specialist rules being used for all the different house gangs. I think that'd be really cool. For example, you can have specialists within a house cotter gang, like maybe one guy is like an orator, for example, or maybe another guy like protects a relic, for example, that does certain things in the game. Or for example, maybe you go to like your Escher fighters, for example, and like you have like an actual like chemist that can do stuff for your gang, or a number of things. I'll be really interested to see exactly what they end up doing with that game mechanic later on. So there you guys have it. This is our overall impression of Necromunda Hive Secundus, should you buy it. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is valuable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all those greatest hobby news related to this channel. That's good for this one, guys. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out and stay classy.